Meet Mike Wilson in Wales and me, Harmony Gates, in California in Mondays with Mike. Drop in on our wise, warm, spontaneous discussions where we explore the deep stuff of life, revealing the wisdom, insight, and truth that lives in us. Discover resources for living and sharing your fullest aliveness and for enhancing your capacity for safe, comfortable, emotionally connected relating. Welcome to episode 39. I'm partway through rewatching the movie Avatar, and I share my thoughts about it with Mike and tell him why I especially appreciated the film. It has a lot to do with the way that the characters were animated. We talk a little about Mike's stories of trust from episode 38, and then I talk about my biological father's death and what I felt at the time. We discuss how several emotions can be felt seemingly simultaneously, or at least in close succession, including grief and sadness, along with celebration and appreciation. Next, we compare some aspects of Indigenous and modern Western cultures. We ask, what type of society does each create? How would each view success? How are children raised to become adults? Does our modern Western style of upbringing help children become people who design their own lives? I introduced Maria Montessori and her educational experiment with latchkey children in Italy that became the basis for the Montessori method of early childhood education. We hope you will enjoy this episode. So, here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good to see you.
And you?
It's nice that we have this meeting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Since we agreed to cut the time back, plus the time of day we have it, it's much easier for me to look forward to it.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Mm.
It's good to hear.
If it was going to stretch to an hour, I'd be thinking, oh no, I've got to talk to Harmony in a minute. But when I think, well, half an hour to three quarters of an hour, I think, yeah, that's doable. That'll be nice.
That's nice. And it's a little earlier for you. So,
Yeah, and we'll be finishing by 6 p.m. here, so then it means the evening's clear.
yeah. I'm the same way. I want to have my evening like,
Mm.
just my little routine in the evening, and I don't really want extra social or extra input. Last night I didn't bring it close, but I started watching. I have a copy of the film Avatar. Do you remember that one?
I did, yeah. I remember going to the cinema to watch that and being rather disappointed. But
Yeah.
have you
Well,
seen it?
oh yeah, I saw it years ago, and actually a friend of mine, one of my dance friends at the time, and he's a tech person, so he took a copy of the movie and he removed all the violent scenes and he kind of turned it into just the love story part of that movie and created a separate movie, which I haven't been able to find. I don't know what happened to it, but one of the reasons I love that movie, and I really do, is because I'm very, very physically oriented, movement,
Mm.
dance, and all of that. And just watching the I forget their name now. I was just watching the movie Nobi or Naobi, whatever that the indigenous, you know, peoples are, and the way they move and the way they move with the other animals. And that for me is just thrilling because they're a made up body. It's a human, but not quite, has a cat tail and has kind of cat ears, but can move just so beautifully. And to me, the movement is really, really authentic of the
Mm.
combinations. So there's a part of me that just goes, this is awesome that they were able to do this. Yeah. So that's why I'm watching it, really, is to delight in that aspect of it. The movie itself is dark, actually. If I haven't watched to the end, I only watched half of it last night, but I think it ends rather darkly with the
Mm.
humans kind of wiping out the indigenous people, or close to it. So I'm not looking forward to watching that. But yeah, still on my mind. Just the other piece I like about it is when I watched it, it was like, wow, the indigenous people are kind of a combination of Native American and African American in terms of their stature, the way they look, their voices. It's like the designers of the film really pulled on those two. We see sort of they're writing those kind of horse-like things, and that looks just really like my fantasy of the Plains Indians and some of their cultural practices, right? Those cultural practices. Yeah, so in that way, uh, it actually fills me with a really good I don't know, a very positive kind of feeling watching. And like I say, I've only watched the movie up to the point where if you remember the story, the American Marine who's lost use of his legs lives in this avatar body. So he has all this physicality that he normally wouldn't have. And he's being trained how to live like the Nobi, and it kind of reminds me a bit of, we've talked a little bit about rites of passage in some of the indigenous cultures, how they learn and go through these processes to become, fully adult. And it's like he goes through that process in a really short amount of time, being trained like with a personal mentor. Those are the aspects that I enjoy. Yeah. Yeah. I was just thinking maybe you'll watch it again through my eyes a little bit after that description. I don't know if
Yeah,
it's possible.
I did watch it. I watched it at the cinema, so I probably went with my friend Bob because we normally go to the cinema together. And I remember thinking it had I think it had overdone it. It lacked the subtlety uh,
Mm,
of the qualities of the indigenous people of that planet, and that they had borrowed very heavily and without any subtlety from other cultures, Earth cultures.
right.
So in the end, I thought the whole thing was a little disappointing.
Yeah, I can imagine from that point of view, I could agree with you. It's blatant in some ways that are
Yeah.
non-respectful in a way. When I first saw it, I remember feeling that a bit. But given what it seems like the cultural baseline is on the planet in terms of understanding or having any kind of reverence for a culture different than the capitalist white male dominated, you know, that's actually represented in that movie too in some pretty blatant ways. Um yeah, it's made for the American public, that movie.
Mm.
In a way that
Exactly. Yeah.
it's not a Japanese film or a foreign film or an art film. Mm. Mm-hmm. Hmm. So did we have a theme for today? Do you remember? Did you put anything on your calendar?
I didn't.
I didn't either. I
No, I
don't
don't
think.
think there's anything planned.
Yeah. I was thinking about it a little, how last I think our last meeting was where you told the stories about trust on
Mm.
Wednesday, right?
Yeah.
And I posted that one right away. So I don't know if you've watched it, uh, but I put it up on the YouTube channel.
think I watched maybe half of it. I didn't want to watch it all the way through.
There's a lot of you.
Yeah, and
Uh,
when I watched it, it was probably the day after or very soon after. So excuse me, I'm really
you're
uncomfortably
hot.
cold.
Yeah, you're humid.
Um, yeah, it was very soon, like the day or two after, and I think it was still fresh in my mind.
Right. So it probably felt redundant a
So
bit.
it, not about redundant. It was just oh yeah, I remember all of this. I said this a couple of days ago.
Yeah. So not fresh
Yeah, not it
or
wasn't.
too fresh, both. It's not
Too
fresh,
fresh.
but yeah. 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 My friend watched it, and her one comment was it was sad. She and I said, "What was sad? Do you mean that the fact that Leah Joy died?" And she said, "Yes."
Mm,
I was like, "Oh." To me, it had a lot more depth than that. I thought it was a celebration, actually, of trust, and of your transformative
yeah, it's a
experiences.
strange when I think about it. I actually a few days after Linda Joy died, I went to my regular MVC practice group,
Hmm.
and we always have a little check in when we at the beginning of the meeting. And I quite often, because it's a half an hour drive, and I quite often on the way over I'll be wondering, oh yeah, just checking with myself, what am I going to say in the check-in?
Hmm.
And I thought I've realised I'm feeling a lot of sadness and a lot of joy at
Wow.
the same time. So there was that the joy, the gratitude,
Ah.
the friendship I had, and the sadness, obviously.
Mm.
A very dear friend had died, but yeah, there was joy and gratitude as well.
Hmm. Hmm. I am remembering when my genetic father died. I had a similar kind of combination of emotions because I wasn't raised with him. I didn't know him, but yet in the
Mm,
last 5 years leading up to his death, and he wasn't sick, it was a sudden surprise. Uh, his death was, and but we both had made an effort to get to know each other, and I'd spent some time in his home, living with him, and doing my best to let him get to know me. And we had conflict, but we got through it. And, we got to know each other a little. And I remember just feeling, um, even though our relation, it was good, but also difficult in some way. There were a lot of unanswered questions, like why did he leave? And,
mm,
all of that. And he attempted to answer. And so it was an adult, but still with the wounded child inside of me kind of conversations and so my last visit to him had been at his house, I think maybe over Thanksgiving, something like that, with other relatives. And it's kind of complicated. He married a woman who had 5 children about my age, and I'd spent some
wow.
time with them uh, right during when I was in my college years. And but this was like a later chapter where I'd spent about 5 years in 5 years time with him each year. And he was a fly fisherman. That was his kind of retirement hobby. And he and some friends for the second year had gone to Russia, and they were in Russia before Russia opened up, I think, before the
Mm,
Soviet Union opened up, or maybe right after. Actually, if I could remember the year, we would know, but I'm not going to go there right now. And he died of a heart attack there
in Russia.
in Russia
Wow.
on this fly fishing trip. And before I knew the whole story, which is a great story, how they got him out of there, because he was now a corpse in Russia, and how to get him back to
Mm,
the States. And I love the story that they ended up tying him down to the base of like a little plane with fishing line so he wouldn't roll around in the plane, something like that. Was really funny.
mm,
But I got the phone call, and I had a friend in my apartment at the time, and the phone call came just, Rupert has died in Russia. And I remember it kind of hit me like boom in my chest, like this big just, and I felt the intensity of that. Ah, and then I felt this extreme joy that was, I had my last time with him, I had told him I loved him. I had been as real and as connected as I
Mm.
possibly have been. Like there was nothing unsaid, nothing left to kind of, that I wished I had said or done. And that together with, yeah, just that, what is that emotion? I'm sure you felt it also. There's a it's a celebration. It was a joy, of, well, we did
Mm.
good. We did good. I did good. It was good. And it's sad that there can't be more. But what time we did take together, I brought my full self into that. And,
Mm.
you
That
know,
sounds like gratitude to me.
yeah, yeah,
And I guess gratitude to yourself for having allowed yourself the opportunity and
yeah,
showed up authentically.
yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah. And it was pretty much initiated on my part. I think I'm the one that said, "Hey, how about if I come stay with you?" Sort of.
Was it
uh,
hard to find him, or did you always know where he was?
I didn't know where he was for years. Well, no, yeah, it's kind of a story. I think I've let you know that I was 3 years in a religious cult.
Yeah.
So, and I was in Montana, which is a big kind of central state in the United States up in the north. And
Mm.
then next to that is Idaho. And then next to that is Oregon and California. So it turns out where I was living in that religious cult in Montana was about a 5 hour drive from where he lived in Idaho. And it was near an area he liked to fish. So, and he had this like motorhome, kind of an old Winnebago. And so he actually initiated, I think, the first visit. Somehow he came over to where I was because I was locked in the cult. I couldn't travel at that time. And so he came over to where I was and to fish, I think maybe in Yellowstone or something like that. Uh, and spent like 3 hours with me. He met with me, took me out to dinner. We talked a little, and we hadn't seen each other for 10 or 12 years at that moment. And still trying to figure this part out, but because I have money issues of my own, kind of confusion around money. But each time he visited, he did that like 3 years in a row. And then I left the cult. And then that's when I started spending time with him in Idaho. Uh, but sporadic. I didn't stay with him. I was trying to figure out my own life. But at each end of each visit, after a nice dinner with him, he would hand me two crisp $100 bills and say, spend it on something dumb.
Spend recklessly.
Yeah.
Mm.
Which I still don't do. It's very hard for me to do. But that's what he was encouraging. Yeah. I have a picture of him that is from a photo that's been sort of touched up from when he was around 14 years old in my on the way into my bedroom. He's just you know, a young teen, kind of a preteen, very good looking.
You said they've been touched up.
Well, what they used to do was they'd take a photograph and then maybe add a little bit of rouge pink, some
Yeah,
artists would, yeah,
there's a photograph of my father like that. Yeah, like you said, like a little bit of
yeah,
redness on his cheeks, and
uh-huh,
because presumably it was a black and white photo.
exactly, yeah,
Because I think colour photography was pretty unusual back then. Because I guess
right,
my father was roughly the same age as yours.
yeah,
I think mine was born in 1922.
yeah. I don't even know. My father was I'm not so good with numbers, but
Mm. Basically, if my father was alive, he'd be approaching 100 now.
yeah, that's
And
about
yeah, so
right.
I don't know where that photo. I'm guessing my sister's got it. And apart from him looking very formal and sort of smart and smartly trimmed and
Right.
brushed hair,
Everything's
and
all
wearing a
perfect and
tie, he looks
it's
pretty much exactly like I did at a similar age.
yeah. Wow.
So there's a very strong family likeness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I have some of my father, but also a lot of my mother in the way that
Mm,
I look. I remember my stepdad telling me that was another sort of estranged relationship for a lot of years. And then I went to visit and he said, well, there's no doubt that you're your mother's daughter, you know? And he hadn't seen me from like early, 18, 19, 20 till about 30 and just went,
mm.
yeah. So it's just
I don't
funny
think
how,
I had any likeness to my mother. I don't think my sister or I had any likeness to our mother.
wow, strong genes on your father's side, right?
Guess so, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Dominant.
Mm,
Yeah. Hmm. I know the thing that I was thinking we could talk about um, was just this kind of thing that where I think we got to maybe in that other uh, sharing. Well, you shared kind of the anger piece at the end. You talked about the two trust stories and then being with Callahan and having the people be like
mm.
screaming at each other
Yeah,
and the guy walking by and going, ah,
yeah. The waiter with our coffee.
freaked
What
out
the
waiter.
fuck? Who are these people?
Oh, um, but I think I maybe mentioned either during that story or another, just this idea of um, that deep trust in relationship
Mm,
with another. Partly, two things come to me. One is that it's developed over time, you know, at least as adults. When we're infants, I think we just are open, initially to bond. And
yeah.
so there isn't this guardedness or what is it, it just kind of is our nature in a sense,
Mm.
unconditioned at that point, right?
If we
Yeah,
didn't grow up in the civilization that we unfortunately did grow up in, we would probably retain that ability into adulthood.
I would think so.
It's only
Yeah,
because of the trauma that we encounter growing up that we
yeah.
hide that
We learn
ability.
to we learn to protect ourselves from and the book I mentioned, the continuum concept, we talked a little about that at some point. That book talking about indigenous tribe in South America, she also explains how the adults interact. The adults that are raised this way, where the infant is really in contact with the mother and the mother's body until it wants, like you hold your cat until it wants to get away, like that.
Mm.
You're holding, and then the infant wants to wants to be moving around. And so she lets it do that. And then it
Yeah, I'd
comes to
forgotten
her.
we spoke about that last time. Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember because I spoke about some the hippies that I knew in here in Wales.
Right, exactly. And we
Mm.
talked about how partial understanding of that can be useful, but it
Yeah.
it needs to be, the culture itself then really gives all this freedom to the infant. Once they're out of the arms, they trust the infant and the infant has watched and observed how adults live. So it's been on while the mother's cooking, while she's foraging, while she everything. So it's kind of, been immersed in the the lifestyle and culture, which is because of the nature of the tribe. It's not sitting at a desk or being on a phone. It's, creating the livelihood, what it takes to stay alive in the culture, and the basket weaving and the what grinding of the corn, whatever they're doing. So the infants then want to, once they're mobile, they want to imitate. They want to
Mm.
emulate. Yeah, so they
And
naturally start working.
we learn about what interests us just because we can watch people work. I remember when I was a kid, we spent hours watching, well, hours probably not, but it seemed like hours. But then I'm remembering what the attention span of a child
Child,
is. It was
yeah.
probably minutes. We spent a lot of time
Uh-huh.
watching builders building a wall and laying bricks, and I think how, because it was all done by hand then, there was no machinery involved.
Right, right.
I think even the mortar was probably mixed by hand. There was probably no cement mixer. So we watched, and we gain a little bit of knowledge and a little bit. Is that something I want to get into when I'm an adult? Probably not. But then we might. I didn't, but we might watch people weaving baskets. You might watch
Right,
potters. We might watch carpenters. Oh, that carpenter. Now that looks interesting. Maybe I'd like
right,
to work with wood when I grow up.
right. Well,
So we
and
find out about options, and I think there's much less of. Oh, but you can't watch the builders anymore because they're fenced off.
yeah,
You can't get close.
those, especially the kind of manual activities
Mm,
are not as apparent. Even how do we deal with food? It comes in a package in the market, right? Those kinds of things. It what comes to mind is having heard people who are now like famous comedians or stand up or in the entertainment industry having watched a lot of TV and said and having a similar kind of experience like, oh, that looks fun, getting up and being funny or
yeah.
whatever, right? And then and or acting. So these are
I get
similar.
that watching. I guess you wouldn't, because if you don't enjoy violent films, but watching Quentin Tarantino films is like everything he does is like a love letter to cinema.
Yeah.
I mean, his films look like they're made by somebody who absolutely loves movies.
So the quality, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
of
there's
the
quite
art
often
itself.
there's a little homage to
Right.
another genre or to another film.
Right.
There's
Right.
one in Kill Bill, which is appallingly violent, which you wouldn't like at all. But he's there's like a homage to the kung fu films that I used to watch them as well. We weren't supposed to. They had a 18 certificate, but we snuck in. We
Right.
skived off school and
Yeah.
went to the cinema when
Yeah.
we were 14, 15. And they were made on probably 16 millimeter. They were quite grainy. And
Hmm.
when Tarantino was making the when it sort of cuts to the bit where one of them is being trained by the kung fu master, the martial arts master, it's gone all grainy. It looks like one of the old kung fu films we watched when I was a kid. But
Really?
that's just one bit, but there's a lot of it. And apparently all the music he uses comes from his own collection. And you must have a huge and eclectic collection of music. So again, he
Hmm.
loves music. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a guy who's definitely doing what he loves,
Hmm.
which in
Right.
itself is inspiring. Even if you don't like the work he produces,
Right. He's doing
there's
it in
someone
a
who's
way
found what he
that
loves and he's doing it.
that brings in all the pieces that he
Mm,
uh that who he is. It's who he is on screen in many ways. And turned into, I think a lot of artists are, we're all artists maybe to some degree, but we're taking ourselves and putting it out in some way. This is kind of who I am. This is coming from me and I'm showing the world in some kind of
mm.
way, right?
So
Taking the
Tarantino didn't go to film school. He didn't get taught how to make films. He just
Mhm.
learned by watching films.
Right. Well, the original filmmakers didn't go to film school either.
There wasn't a film school.
Right, exactly. It's so
Mm,
interesting how someone starts something and then everybody has to go to that school to learn it. Well, really? That's a whole other topic, but um I'm
but
a
yeah, we were talking about how kids interact with adults in there.
right, and
Because
how
now
the
we send them to
adults,
school. Which,
the trust piece too is where the adults
mm,
actually they they expect the child at a certain, they don't hover and protect or direct. They wait for the child to come to them. There's a
mm.
really interesting um
So they're trusting the child.
right, and not imposing themselves or direct. It's like they're trusting the child to once they've given it that unarms initial piece where the child's gotten all that it needs in terms of the close bonding and feeling of safety and being part of and included and all these, at least that's what the assumption is, I guess, that happens during that real initial period. Then they're free. They're no longer neurotic or needing, they're not going to be, I need your attention, I need your attention. They don't care about the parent's attention. they go do their thing and then they hurt
Mm.
themselves and they come to mom and go, ouch, she fixes it. That's it. They go off again.
I wonder
Right.
if kids would be easier to spend time separated from mum if they trust they'll get the attention when they need it. And the
Exactly.
kids are clingy because they don't trust. I'm guessing now. This is just came to mind. Kids are clingy because they don't trust that mum will be there if they were to step away.
Exactly. At least that's even the um, psychological theory understanding about anxious attachment, where and that and it goes all the way up into adulthood. It's like mom isn't
Mm.
there, no, my friends aren't going to be there, my relationship partner might go away, and so there's this constant sort of underlying uh mistrust, almost an unfulfilled like sense of uh sufficiency, maybe.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
sufficient care. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So when that level of care is met, then uh, they move on to the next stage, which is exploration and finding out about life. And yet there's, but knowing they belong and knowing there is, you know, caring available. And even Maria Montessori talks about this too. Rather than filling children's heads with facts, Maria Montessori was a Italian back in the 1920s who was, I forget what her background was, but she was around latchkey kids where the parents all worked and the kids would just kind of
Mm.
ran around. And she created a school, but so
We have
much
them in the
different.
UK. You have
Yeah.
Montessori schools in the UK.
Yeah. And she looked at what are they needing, like, so in other words, like this indigenous parent, like, I'm not going to really show you anything until you say you want it, and then I will help you, you know get to what it is that you're wanting and desiring, and just to the point where you can now do it yourself, right? Not over instructing, but just giving just enough um modeling or pointing in a direction where to find a resource or whatnot, and then let the child have the freedom, to do what they need and then go get the mentoring or the help or the guidance when they want it based on their own desire. So
Mm.
that was what she recognized, uh, and had these were little, 4 or 5 year old, 3 to 5 year old children initially that she worked with. And, comes to mind the goal of that kind of allowance is you end up with people who design their own life. They're not put through a system to go fit as a cog in a system that's already
Mm.
figured
Well, I like
out.
the phrase
Yeah.
design their own life. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a quite inspiring way of hearing it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you end up with people my age wondering what on earth they want to do with what's left of their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Who they
So
are. What do they
it's so
want to
deeply
do?
buried.
Yeah. Yeah. Unlike Terrence. What's his name? The director?
Quentin
Tarantino.
Tarantino,
Quentin,
yeah.
thank you. I'm
Mm.
so media ignorant. But
There
yeah.
was one of the hippie kids one of the kids of the hippies that I lived with for a while was because they did try to give their kids as many experiences as they wanted,
Yeah.
and some of them did circus skills, which is actually quite a popular thing for kids to do, particularly among the hippies.
Yeah.
And there was one of them, probably the eldest girl, who I think at the time was probably 12 or 13, and they were very physically very active, these kids. So
Yeah.
she had no problem climbing poles and learning all the skills, and it was pretty obvious that was going to be her choice. And up to that point, she'd not been pushed into education at all. They'd all been home educated and mostly just did whatever the hell they liked.
Right.
all day, every day. But
Hmm.
once she was motivated, she found a way. She found a course at a college. It was actually quite a way away, so she had to work out the buses. She arranged in the week to stay with her grandparents so that the journey would be less arduous. So she'd be near the bus stop to
Hmm.
get the bus to. And
Hmm.
she did what's called I can't remember what it stands for, but it's called a BTEC. It's a technical qualification that kids do instead of the usual. Most kids that go through school do O levels and A levels,
Right. So
but
she
there is an
did.
alternative route. She did this thing called a BTEC with some kind of technical thing. She did a BTEC in circus skills.
Right.
And I
Right.
imagine she's probably. I've lost touch with them. I guess she's probably working at Cirque du Soleil, but Circus du Soleil,
Right. Exactly.
or something like
Pilobolus or
that.
Cirque du Soleil or some,
Yeah.
so inspiring to me, and this is what A.S. Neal found too. And he let the children pick what they were interested in. This is Summerhill. You're familiar with that.
Hmm.
We've talked about
Yeah.
that
We
in the
talked about that
schools we're
before,
talking
didn't we?
about. They first of all, success isn't defined by having the most toys when you die. You
Mm.
know, success instead is, am I happy with myself and my life and what I'm doing? You know,
Probably having had the most fun while you were alive.
yeah, certainly, certainly fun would seem to be part of that equation.
Mm.
And so that once the children found an interest area, they became very motivated. And that's very, what I think of as very adult like behavior, even though that's maybe not the right term, but I can like something, I can make decisions, I can move toward it. I'm not waiting for someone to give me permission, or that, it's like that the I can't think of the word just now, but sort of the enterprise of this young girl to figure out how to get what she wanted, in order to go further, to pursue what was really interesting to her, and how to,
Mm.
travel there. Where's the money going to come from? Who's going to, and what might it lead to? Maybe even what it leads to, if that's left in the space where, oh, you can't do that. Nobody ever makes it. Do you know how many percentage of singers actually make enough money to make a living? This kind of like pressure or dissuasion that young children or even young adults often get in an interest area. Why study that? There are no jobs, instead of like,
Mm.
yeah, go make your life. Who knows what you'll do if it's something that really has your passion and, you know.
There's a funny story about that. There's a friend of mine. Well, actually, I've lost touch with him as well, which is a shame. David, friend from when I lived near London,
Mhm.
same age as me, give or take a year or two. He went to university and studied accountancy, and had quite a successful career in accountancy. And conversation, he said that when because he went straight from university from school,
Mhm.
and he said he desperately wanted to study environmental science, and these parents and school teachers talked him out of it because there was no career.
Right.
Well,
Yeah, guess what?
30 years later,
Exactly.
he'd have been doing what he loved and making a very good living at it, but nobody realised what was going to happen.
Right.
So yeah, I'd say yeah, if it's what somebody desperately wants, if it's where their passion lies, something you
Right.
don't need to make a load of money. You need to make enough to put a roof over your head and food in the fridge.
Exactly. And I mean, I can see that parents, again, are trying to protect. This is why they often, it's like, oh no, life is kind of unsafe and unsure. Do this thing that is guaranteed, and then you'll be safe. It comes from their own, their own shortage consciousness, if you will.
Scarcity, yeah.
Yeah,
I
scarcity.
when I realised I no longer wanted to be a software engineer, I was earning something like 4 times the national average in the UK,
Yeah,
and I was miserable.
right.
And now I'm surviving on less than half the national average, and I the happiest I've ever been.
And so that's the thing too. And plus, I've said this to you before, but you actually got to the place where you were earning what was so supposed to be the pie in the sky. Ding, ding,
Mm.
ding, you made it, right? Now you're happy. And you went, but I'm not, right?
No.
Whereas I think what happens is people that can't get to that, they don't get to that place. So they keep thinking, what is your comment? If it's not working, do more of it. Something like that, right?
Yeah.
You know, we
Keep
it's
climbing that greasy pole. When
yeah,
you get to the
it's
top,
kind of
you'll
hard to
be happy.
believe, like it's hard to believe if you're raised in a certain environment that, wait a minute, you think, wait a minute, how could I possibly be happy on half the national, you know, minimum wage or
Mm.
whatever, because this is what makes me, you know, the whole culture is kind of ramrodding people. That's pretty strong, but
Yeah.
there isn't a lot of alternative points of view unless you dig for them, or people that you know, that you can say, ah, but my uncle, you know,
Mm.
he went through this story and he's really happy, so maybe I can. Right, those kind of role models that give us permission and a little bit of hope that maybe if we think differently, it's actually okay. And
This is mostly the messages we're going to get from society, from television, from family, from school is if you make enough money, you're going to be happy. They don't often say exactly how much money is enough.
yeah,
Because if they did and we believed them, we wouldn't have billionaires because people would probably stop off the first couple of million.
yeah, but they keep raising the bar. I'll never forget
Yeah, they
this.
keep raising the bar. I mean, I think we finally found the solution. We're going to send all the billionaires into space.
And they'll go on their own accord because they've
Yeah,
that's
we
yeah,
just got to stop them coming back again, basically.
yeah, right. I remember someone doing a study. I think this was legitimate, or asked, maybe it was just somebody asking someone who was extremely wealthy, how much is enough?
Mm.
And their
Well,
answer
Mickey
was,
Cashman spoke about this. Yeah,
and
they
their
asked lots
answer,
of
do you
people.
remember the answer?
It was 10%. How much they had? It was 10% more.
It was just, the way I heard it is, how much is enough? More. Just,
Ah, okay. Now the version that Mickey told was slightly different then, because she
mhm,
told they were talking to people who were not the mega rich, but people who had many millions, like
mhm.
hundreds of millions, and were still striving for more. And the typical answer was whatever they had, it was about 10% more than what they
10%
had.
more. So then you accumulate that and now you need
Mm.
10%
Another
more. So it
10%.
just, yeah,
Oh, well, I'm
it's
not a billionaire yet. I need another 200 or 300 million to make it to be. Then I'll be okay when I'm a billionaire. Being a multi-billionaire isn't enough. Nope.
oh,
How happy does that Amazon bloke look? He looks bloody miserable, actually.
yeah, I don't feel envious of any
No.
billionaire I've ever even sort of peripherally encountered. So I'm really happy, you know, and I think you're pretty happy too. And
Pretty
neither of us
happy.
are, you know, chasing
I'd have a
after
bigger
money.
place to live if I had loads of money, but I haven't got it. So this place will work.
Well, that's the same, you know, it's good enough, right? How much is enough? Good enough. And then, you know, what's the trade-off? If I'm going to
Mm.
spend all this time trying to get enough money to have a nice, and then I'm not spending that time doing other things that
I have. I mean, this morning I walked along. There's in Wales you can walk the whole of the coast. There's a footpath along
wow.
the whole of the Welsh coast that is open to the public, and there's a stretch from where I live to the next village.
Hmm.
And I walked along there this morning. It's along a cliff top. It's a long way down. Falling off would be a really bad idea. It's a rugged coastline with big high cliffs.
Uh-huh.
And I looked at it and oh, and I just, there's a physical sensation of joy just to be here. I live here. I'm a few minutes walk from home. Ah, what else could I possibly want?
Oh, you know, I have a similar experience, but it's not about nature, although I'm sort of envious of I can imagine you on the cliffs and that same feeling. But almost every morning I step out and I am in urban Oakland, right?
Mm,
There's houses everywhere and downtown there, and I can see across to the mountains, and then the coast is way out there. But I get out on I have a fire escape. I'm on the third floor. So this little narrow kind of walkway, but I can step out this window. And I stand there and I look at everything, even if it's a foggy day, and I put my arms up and I think, ah, here I stand. I take my place among all this. And it's just like, let it in, let it out, just be like, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's, and I can physically feel it, energetically when I really, it's not just a gesture. It's really, you know, and I think of, do you remember? I don't know. This is a Disney movie. I hardly watch things, but in The Lion King, there's where they hold the little lion cub up and it's like, here we are, we're the king of the,
Never seen
you
it.
know, but I don't feel like I'm the king of anything except my own life,
That's
you
enough,
know?
isn't it?
Yeah.
Did I tell you the story about meditation, about the meditation teacher?
Try me.
Because what you just said, I mean, yeah, we can make this a wrap up because I'm starting to tire and it's getting on
Okay.
the top
It's
of the
time
morning.
anyway. You're right.
Yeah, I went to a meditation. I guess it was a morning. It was a sort of morning's lessons from a bona fide Tibetan Buddhist monk.
Is this morning in early in the day or morning like MOURN? Just to be
Early in the day.
okay.
It was probably a day actually. It was probably mid morning until mid afternoon. I don't exactly remember. It was a few years ago.
Okay.
He'd escaped from Tibet, which is quite it's difficult and dangerous. But he'd made it to the west, and he was living in Cardiff. I think it was about 100 miles from here.
Mm.
And I guess there were 30, 40 people in the room,
Mm-hmm.
and he asked each of us about our meditation. You've heard the story?
Yeah, but go ahead and finish it.
Finish it for the recording.
Yeah,
And
for
there
all
was
of them.
some serious meditators there. There were people who did Vipassana and
Mm-hmm.
sort of meditate for days on
Really
end.
regular hour, twice a day, like deep into
Well,
the
there's
practice.
people whose idea of a vacation is to go and go to a centre and meditate
10
for 10
days,
days.
no speaking. Yes.
And there were plenty of people who did half an hour twice a day.
Mm-hmm.
And he asked me. I said, I don't have a formal practice, but wherever I am on the beach, in the forest, whatever, I like to just remember to become present to myself in this place where I am for one breath. And when he got all the way around the room, he pointed to me and he said, "Our friend here understands meditation." And that came to mind when you said about when you step out onto the fire escape.
Right. It's this
Yeah,
moment fully alive and,
here
and
in this
every
bubble,
moment,
this
that's
place.
one where I really name it, but then it is an ongoing practice of this is
Mm.
me and this is
Maybe
my
that's
life.
my role in life is to teach meditation
That's it by being it.
because it doesn't take long.
It's not just
One
about when
breath.
you're sitting on the cushion. What?
Nope. It's one breath. And if you're really advanced, it could probably be two breaths. But don't overdo it.
Don't turn it into a dogma or a have to,
Mm. Yeah, yeah,
Don't make it a job because then it's
yeah.
not the thing.
We're not going to
Yeah.
write volumes about this.
No,
There we are.
that's it.
I'm
We did it.
I'm complete.
I am
Yeah,
complete. It's been a delight as
as
always.
always. Yeah.
All right. So let's do our
Yeah.
sign
Have an
off.
excellent day, and I'll see you on Wednesday.
Yep. We'll be doing our Wednesday meeting.
Yeah. Till then,
All right. Be well.
you too. Take care.
Thank you for spending this time with us. If you liked this podcast, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel to stay with us. And tell us what you thought of this episode. We love to read your thoughts in the comments section.